Well, it's not just about cities, that's for sure. We're going to focus on that a little bit. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for those great remarks to really set the scene for us. And good morning. I realize the presentation is not loaded yet. One moment. Just saw that. Remember when New York City looked like this? This was just 3 months ago, when New York City had the worst air quality in the world. Or remember when it also looked and felt like this? This was Ida, which happened just 2 years ago, the worst rainfall-driven event, flooding here in New York City in our lifetimes, which actually broke a record that was set just a few days before for extreme rainfall. I mention this because the way most people experience climate change is through climate-fueled extreme weather events. And these events are becoming more frequent. They're not only becoming more frequent, they're becoming more intense, and they're lasting longer, which makes heat waves, droughts, coastal storms, floods, winter extremes even much more impactful. It means they're impacting more people, and they're costing more. Here in the United States, we've already experienced $23 billion disasters in just this year alone. So on top of this, we also have to adapt to a new climate normal of individual extreme events, because we have to prepare for events that co-occur. I'll give you an example. Extreme heat and humidity after Hurricane Maria devastated the infrastructure in Puerto Rico in 2017 and then caused a health crisis. But let's look beyond these events. What else do we know? Last year, with hundreds of scientists around the world, we released the outcome of a 7-year assessment effort to assess the global state of climate change by the IPCC. I'm sure you've seen a lot of this. I want to give you 4 quick takeaways from this report. The first one, and we've been talking about this already, is that climate change multiplies challenges that we're already facing, including food, energy, and water security, and basically it makes them worse. Second, it's the poorest and the most marginalized who are facing the worst impacts, and thus they're the ones who really need the most support, including financial, technological, and institutional support. Third, and to me, this is really the most sobering one that came out of this entire report, is that the next 20 to 30 years of climate change are already built into the climate system. So let's put this in perspective. What this means is that about 16 times as many people may face extreme heat as are already facing it now. And you're probably very familiar with the simmering hot summer that we've just gone through. It also means that up to 1 billion people living in low-lying areas may be exposed to coastal flooding. So to me, a way to kind of interpret this data is to say that no matter how aggressively we focus on reducing carbon emissions, which is fundamental, it's even existential, we're not likely to stop the acceleration of climate impacts on our communities for multiple decades. So we need to be focused, as we heard earlier, on adapting to climate change as much as we are focused on halting climate change. So here's a question for you. How much of global finance do you think is focused on adaptation? Any ideas? 10%, right? Clearly, we have to aggressively scale up finance and investments in adaptation and resilience, including through engineered approaches, through nature-based approaches, also social and institutional transformations. The last point I want to make from the report is that what we also showed is that the impacts on people, infrastructure, and economies will be largest in cities and urbanized regions. And that's because they're concentrated in those areas. So this also means it makes cities the locus for where scaled up investment and adaptation can have significant positive impacts on people's lives. In short, cities can be turned from problems into solutions, but they need open access to the best technology. Even if we solve the finance gap, they need open access to the best technology and data to be able to make adaptation investments and decisions in the places where they can have real impact on people. I'll give you some examples here. The city of New York has spent millions of dollars on investments in technology, on investments in scientific research and data to make informed decisions on where and how to adapt to coastal flooding, to urban flooding, to extreme heat. Here's one I want to just dial in just to show you how we've been doing this and what this means for cities who don't have the same resources. In 2018, after Hurricane Harvey devastated Houston, Texas, we realized in New York that we just don't know enough about how extreme rainfall may cause flooding here in our city. So we set about to change that. In a large team modeling effort that we co-led here out of the New School, the team spent 3 years using the latest hydrological models to generate new data for decision making. In May 2021, before that Ida storm that I showed you, the city released the Stormwater Resiliency Plan, and it included the outputs of that technical effort to help us learn under different rainfall and coastal sea level rise scenarios where it's going to flood, how deep it's going to be, and that information was provided with high spatial specificity. So now we are able to better prioritize millions to billions of dollars in flood resilience investments where they can have the most impact on reducing exposure and risk of flooding for people, for their homes, for their schools, for the critical infrastructure that they depend on for everyday life in the city. And this is just one of many examples we could all talk about and probably show from well-resourced cities and how they're advancing resilience and adaptation through advanced technology and data. And it's built on data like you see here that's truly impressive. But frankly, most cities, even most communities, don't have an access to this data. In fact, just outside the city here, towns outside New York don't have access to the same data. In the US alone, there's over 5,000 cities and towns who have limited access to climate risk data. And globally, there's more than 1 million cities, towns, and communities, formal, informal areas, who lack local scale risk information. So they just basically don't have the data to ensure that the trillions of dollars of investments in development in the next decade will also protect, prepare, and help them respond to what the increasing climate challenges are coming their way. So the question really is, how can we drive forward a climate resilient development agenda if we don't know what we have to be resilient to? Imagine if we could bring similar or better data to all communities and across the world to make those decisions so that we can safeguard people. And that's exactly what we want to do. This is the showcase we want to present to you today that we're excited to talk about. We're announcing a major new effort we're calling Climate IQ to open access to the best available climate risk information, but also to take the next technological leap, to leverage AI to learn from and provide access to the rapidly changing data and climate landscape. I'll just introduce this a little further. Here are some of the goals of this. First, we want to create a next generation AI environment to drive forward latest advances in machine learning, in computation, and data integration to provide more accurate, higher resolution climate information, especially for multiple hazards, for extreme heat, drought, air pollution, and flooding. Importantly, and this I think really picks up on the points from the previous talk, the key here is to democratize the access, to make this open and available to everyone. We want this technology to be able to help support cities, towns, and decision makers at all levels in order to inform planning, to prioritize adaptation decisions for impact, and also to unlock adaptation finance in the areas that need it most. Who's it for? It's for everybody, but especially as we've been talking about communities, towns, and city-level decision makers who really need this hazard exposure data so they can pinpoint the places where they need to focus what are likely going to be limited amounts of funds that have to be as impactful as they can be. How can you use it? Well, outputs, as you can see here from Climate IQ, will be fed into an open access public dashboard enabling users to view current, near-term, and future risk, and to do that for multiple types of hazards. You're probably wondering, since this is pretty ambitious, how this is actually going to work. So let me walk you through it just a little bit briefly. We brought together an incredible, talented team across the world, including support from Google engineers to help us develop the AI infrastructure and the data backends. We're going to be leveraging machine learning through techniques like convolutional neural networks. We're going to leverage lots of sources of big data and also multiple climate hazard modeling environments. So this means bringing together, in some ways for the first time, outputs from hydrological models, from weather forecasting models, from climate projection models, along with data on land use, buildings, roads, and other infrastructure that are all fed into the machine learning environment so that it can continuously learn and improve its ability to predict exposure to multiple climate hazards. On top of that, we've got to test it. So that means also validating and verifying those outputs with other kinds of event databases, but also critically together with partner cities. This is my last slide. We're going to be developing and testing climate IQ in a whole range of cities. That's kind of key for the impact here. This is so the AI can learn patterns in large and small city and urbanized areas, in formal and informal areas, in temperate, tropical, and desert climates, and in older and newer and developing cities. So to make this happen, of course, requires a lot of partnerships and the ability to look across a range of city types that can feed this critical local, national, and global data into the AI core that can then produce outputs for any city that has similar characteristics. We're super thrilled to be able to be partnering with the City of New York as our first city partner to help us develop, test, and validate this approach, and thank them for coming on board early with us, giving us a vote of confidence and moving this forward, and we're in active discussions with a number of other city partners. I also want to mention that our team includes a whole range of experts, including from ClimateSense, a climate tech startup, which you saw an early prototype of their UI UX environment that was developed with the Australian Red Cross and the City of Melbourne. We also have amazing partners from the Bayer Institute of Ecological Economics, the Stockholm Resilience Center, the Virginia Climate Center at George Mason University, and the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies that's just north of here, just outside the city. Finally, a key component of this is the volunteer team of Google Fellows that we'll be working with, and as we heard, the critical support from Google.org's Climate Innovation Program that makes this possible. So we thank them for believing in this and seeing the ambition that needs to be solved to really address adaptation globally. We're also very proud to be able to call the New School home for this project and here at the Urban Systems Lab. So I'd love to tell you more about this, especially afterwards. We're going to move to the next showcase here in a moment, but I just also want to say that please stay in touch, follow us on social media, and subscribe to newsletters to get updates. And if you work for or with a city, we really want to hear from you. Please reach out to us because we'd love to talk with you about how we can work together to initiate what we think is the beginning of a wider moonshot effort to address the global climate adaptation challenge that we face. Thanks so much. I'm also going to invite up my colleague from WRI, Evan, to tell you about the amazing work that they're doing as well. Thanks, Evan.